Funny thing is, I had this shirt on before I read this news. So word has come down as to when we will get to see Wonder Woman 1984. And apparently that will be for Christmas on HBO Max and also in theaters in America, releasing on that date. Now, this isn't altogether unexpected. It's started happening that studios are drip feeding their releases through whatever they can work best. I know everyone had hoped the pandemic would just be gone by now, but it's not, and it won't be for a while. I don't want to get too much into the weeds about even if we have viable vaccines fairly soon, how long distribution is going to take and everything else. Even setting all that aside, any studio like Warner Brothers or Disney or Paramount or Universal or anybody worth their salt, they need to be planning for 2021 as if theaters will not open the entire year. If they do, great, work with that. But they should be planning around the idea that that won't happen, because they need to plan for the worst case scenario at this point. So it's not shocking that more of these things are starting to get some form of release along these lines, because if they just keep sitting on these finished products, they're not generating any revenue. They're just sitting there. So seeing it get a digital distribution is not all that shocking, all things considered. And it also probably helps at least a little bit that in the case of Wonder Woman 1984, it does seem to have, from what I could tell looking at the trailers and what I read about it, it was trying to go for some topical commentary. If they sit on it too much longer, it's not going to be relevant. So that might be another factor going in. But here's the thing that made me decide I needed to talk about it. Because if it was just the release date, I would have left it at that. But here's the thing. It's being released on HBO Max at no additional cost. If you are subscribed to HBO Max, you just get to watch it come Christmas. Now, this is interesting and kind of important because it's in stark contrast to the last big release that was supposed to hit the theaters that we got in the last few months, which was, of course, Mulan over in Disney+. Now, that had caused a little bit of a kerfuffle by being a $30 rental, even on top of whatever it cost you to have Disney Plus in the first place. So that was a ballsy move on Disney's part. And the thing is, it might even have paid off on the longer term if Mulan had been better received. If you're going to pull a move like that, you really need to be doing it with a product where people are going to say, by the time the credits are rolling, yeah, you know what? That was worth the money. Unfortunately, nobody really seemed to like the live-action Mulan very much, which means Disney really kind of burned that bridge. And pretty much everybody realized, no, it wasn't worth it. I mean, even families who, when theaters are open, are taking 3-4 people plus snacks. $30 in theory is actually probably going to be less money than it would cost them to go to the theater. But you don't just go to the theater for the privilege of seeing the movie early. You go for the experience. And when you're just having an at-home experience, paying what you would pay to go to a movie theater, no, that didn't work. And I think here's the thing. I think Disney realized they blew it and burned that bridge also, because they also have a movie coming out on December 25th, which is Pixar's Soul. And that, like Wonder Woman 1984, is being released just to whoever already has Disney Plus. Now, a couple of things about all this. The first is, we should not be expecting that this is going to be what is standard. The massive tentpole films that used to be the kinds of things that we would go to the theater for are just going to be on streaming services now. That, again, to look at a worst case scenario where either the pandemic drags on for a year, 2 years, or whatever, or not, if it's not that, it drags on long enough that enough theaters close that even when theaters are ready to reopen, it's just not going to see the kind of revenue returns that it used to. What that means is we should not be expecting to see movies of the scale of Wonder Woman 1984 coming to streaming too far going forward. Next year, next couple years even, maybe. But the thing is, the studios have a bunch of these things that are already shot or had started production or had already been budgeted at a certain thing, and they're going to see them through as they had planned them. But the thing is, you don't budget a $200 million movie to release to streaming. That's really bad economics right there. About as big as streaming, direct-to-streaming movies get is maybe $70 million range, like Deadpool 1 money, not Wonder Woman sequel money. But as I said, they can't just sit on these things because they're not generating any revenue if they just sit on them. So they are now starting to drip feed and release them over time so that they're at least getting something in. But they're not suddenly going to start making movies of this scale for streaming. If we end up coming into a world on the other end of this whole mess where theatrical experience becomes more niche or just smaller scale or just doesn't have the foundation and the infrastructure to generate the same kind of revenue anymore, then what that means is if they start making more things directly for streaming, it's just going to be lower budget. So just understand that going in. But I also want to zoom back in on Wonder Woman 1984 specifically because I think there are other things at play as to why they decided to do this one specifically. Because Warner Brothers is probably sitting on a couple of things at this point that it could have been considering releasing. But I think there's a fairly specific element at play for releasing Wonder Woman and releasing it at the timing that they are. Because remember how we got a quote-unquote new, there wasn't actually a lot new in it, trailer for the Snyder Cut for Justice League again? Well, there's more than a little crossover in the audience of people who are interested in seeing Wonder Woman and people who are interested, whether it be because they think it'll genuinely be good or because they're morbidly curious, in seeing Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League. And it's a really solid plan and model to have Wonder Woman come out and then have the time between that and Zack Snyder's Justice League be several months, but not so long that people might not just go, you know what, I'll just hold on to the subscription until that comes out. This is why it was important for HBO to have shows like Westworld and, trying to have other really hook people in his zeitgeist shows to show between seasons of Game of Thrones. Because while it's certainly not a bad thing if people are subscribing to your service strictly for one show, if they're not subscribed during the months when that show isn't airing, well, then that's money you could have been making, but you didn't. So you try and have stuff going on in the off times. And this is kind of a film equivalent of that a little bit. Because there's no doubt that, again, whether it be genuine enthusiasm or morbid curiosity, it doesn't really matter. The money spends the same either way. There's going to be a pretty heavy influx of cash when the Snyder Cut is eventually released. But think of how much more money they could pocket if the people who are planning to see the Snyder Cut, who weren't already subscribed to HBO Max, go, oh, you know what, maybe I'll start in December so I can watch Wonder Woman. And I'll just bum around there for a bit until Snyder Cut comes out. Or failing that, it might be people who already have it who are like, it's a reason to definitely go, oh yeah. You give people reasons to keep looking forward to stuff, and they stick around longer. And I think it's also a pretty smart idea because, to be blunt about it, a lot more people were genuinely excited for Wonder Woman. And look, I know I'm not expecting the Snyder Cut to be good, or at least not to my taste. I'm not trying to badmouth that cut. But what you have to grant me is Snyder's take on the DC properties has been heavily divisive from the beginning. So no matter what you think of the movies he's done up to this point or of his Justice League when it comes out, it is probably also going to be very divisive. So it's a good idea to have a big tentpole release that is something that is likely to have much wider appeal, likely to go down well with a much higher percentage of your audience so that they subscribe, get used to paying it over the months, and then by the time the Snyder Cut comes out, even if they don't like it that much, they probably won't tune out because suddenly that wasn't the only thing they subscribed for. Now, like I said, How far down the line we'll continue to see movies of this scale get released to streaming platforms, it's hard to say. It's really going to depend on how long the pandemic continues to hit at the kind of numbers it has been. And it also depends on how many movie theaters are still up and running when we get on the other side of this, whenever that is. Because I think in a lot of ways what Warner Brothers and now also Disney are doing, which is just releasing their stuff on their services at no extra cost, is the thing these studios have been desperately trying to not have to do, but they're running out of options. Because Warner Brothers tried to get people back in movie theaters to see Tenet. Didn't really work. I mean, number one at the box office for a bunch of empty theaters or closed theaters. Huge shock. That didn't really work. Disney tried their own thing by charging a premium for Mulan. If it had been a better movie, maybe that would have worked, or at least wouldn't have 100% burned that bridge, but it totally did. They're out of options. And so releasing it at no extra cost now, especially at Christmas, it feels like a gift. When in truth, they're probably more accurate to say they've been backed into a corner and are running out of choices for what to do with these things and have to figure out what is going to get us the best results based off the situation we're in. None of us want to be in this situation. What do we do? And under the circumstances, from a business perspective, at least as best as I can sort of parse it, that's a smart move. And I'm looking forward to the movie. I don't know if I'll see it that day. I'll probably see it the day after at the latest. So, Wonder Woman, 1984, free on HBO Max come Christmas. What do you think about that? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon, and it keeps me fed. Why am I singing? I've no idea. And no particular tune. In any case, thanks so much for tuning in. Any amount you're able to help with the Patreon is a great assistance, but you also don't have to, because at the end of the day, my friends, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And happy Trans Awareness Week.